Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. We're about to get started with this webinar on getting inclusion right, a conversation on customer perspectives and inclusive insurance. To get us going this morning, we're going to put a couple polls up on the screen just to get a sense of who we have online with us. So the first poll that you should see on the screen is we're trying to figure out who we have on the phone, what industries you're working on. So which of these categories best describes you? Do you work, in the government or in the public sector with a development organization? Are you in the private sector, or are you in academia or a think tank, or do you work in another type of field? And we'll leave the poll open for just a second, get a sense of who's coming in. Make sure to click submit after you make your selection. And it looks like we have a lot of people today from development organizations in the private sector, which is great. It's great to have you all on the phone. You'll see a second question come up on your screen in just a moment, which focuses more on what geography your focus is. So are you working in Asia and the Pacific, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America and the Caribbean, or the Middle East and North Africa, or do you have a global focus in your work? And again, we'll leave that poll open for just a minute. Okay, great. And it looks like we have a lot of people that have a broad focus geographically. They're looking at a lot of different regions and also a strong contingent focused on Sub-Saharan Africa. Well, that's great. We're happy to have everyone on the call today, and we're very excited to have this conversation with you. My name is Eric Noggle, and I'm the Senior Director of Research on the Applied Research and Special Project team here at CFI. Our team really focuses on looking at a broad set of really interesting and innovative questions facing the financial inclusion industry. So we have a lot of different interesting projects in our portfolio, looking through questions of financial health and financial capability to digital finance. We also do a lot of work to have events like this that engage the industry. So we host webinars and events, including Financial Inclusion Week, which is coming up, which we're very excited about, and looking forward into the spring. Also, the Harvard Business School Accion program on strategic leadership and inclusive finance, which is a great program. And if that's a topic that interests you, I encourage you to check out both projects on our website to see how you can be involved. This webinar is the start of a series that looks at getting inclusion right, which is the theme of our 10th anniversary event. With the support from Citi Foundation, we've commissioned a series of 10 essays on getting inclusion right, from financial inclusion leaders voicing their views about the future of the sector and the key questions that must be addressed to ensure that financial services bring about tangible benefits for the financially excluded and underserved. Over the course of the next month, we'll be releasing these essays. We'll be featuring them on our brand new CFI blog and through webinars such as the one that we're holding today. So please keep an eye out in your email to see those events and make sure they're on your calendar. In addition to today's webinar, where we have 2 of our authors, we have 8 other essays that we'll be presenting. I'm not going to go through all of those topics here, but needless to say that we're really excited about the authors and the topics that we're covering. We have everyone from Tim Adams at the Institute of International Finance writing about why financial inclusion matters, to Catherine Kemp at the University of New South Wales on data privacy and security. We'll be looking at issues of payments and the digital divide, the role of credit, what we've learned over the past 10 years, and also the role of investors in promoting the industry and what we've learned over the past 10 years from them. Each of these writers is very highly qualified to speak on their issue, and we're grateful to have their participation and to hear their voices. All the essayists have combined their own hopes and dreams into their work, along with their personal expertise. And the result, what we hope, is that we have a comprehensive vision for what true north looks like for the financial inclusion sector during the next decade. We'd explicitly like to thank the Citi Foundation for the support of the Getting Inclusion Right essay series, and marking the CFI 10th anniversary, as well as the AXA Group and other sponsors and supporters of the CFI at 10 and Financial Inclusion Week of 2018. So today, as I mentioned, we have two guests who are authors of these essays. The first is Garance Wattez-Richard, and I hope I pronounced that right. I have a very sort of lead-weighted American tongue. So Garance is the head of AXA's Emerging Customers Unit. That unit was launched in 2016, and she's been with AXA since 2005. She spearheaded a number of initiatives, included the ShareForce Shield, which was the first global study of its kind to spotlight the potential for women as a growing client segment in the insurance industry. And prior to being at AXA, she started her career with the European Commission in Brussels before moving to work at the Office of the Chief Economist of the EBRD in London, and then as a strategy consultant. Also with us today, we have Beth Ryan, the Managing Director at CFI, who I'm sure is well known to many of you. She led Accion's initial entry into Africa and India as a Senior Vice President in 2000, and has been with CFI for a long time now, leading all our efforts and engaging the industry. Her work is great. We're really excited to have her with us to share what she's learned about working with clients over the past 10 years. Just a quick note on run of show. So we'll start our interview with Garance looking at inclusive insurance, and we'll give her an opportunity to tell us a little bit about what her essay is about and draw out some of the major themes. And after that, we'll have a period for questions and answers. So I'll start that process off with a few questions based on my reflections on the essay. But please, as Garance talks and we talk about her work, please chat us questions and let us know what you have, and we'll make sure we get those communicated so that we can have a lively conversation about this topic. We'll do that for about 25 minutes in total, and then we'll move on to hear about Beth's work on the consumer perspective with a similar format, wrapping up at about 10:30. And with that, I would like to introduce Garance.
Well, thank you very much. That was a great introduction. It's always to me very motivating to see that there are a lot of people such as your center that put their finger on the pulse of what we're doing in a way that's very operational and in reality with what's going on, because it's true that we're often, and that's what I conclude my my essay with, is that the sort of bottom of pyramid, but even middle of pyramid, let's say, in emerging markets, is very crowded with sort of think tanks, NGOs, multilaterals, private sector insurers, etc., and governments, but we're still counting the number of people protected by insurance in millions rather than billions. So it's crowded and both a crowded and sparse space, let's say. So did you want to start with sort of questions to dive in, or because people maybe can then just read a few pages, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Garance, I think to start off, I mean, I was really struck with reading your essay. I felt like it really brought home the reflection on what insurance was like maybe 10 years ago and our ability to offer insurance now and how different it was. And I think it would be great for the audience to maybe highlight a few of the key themes from your essay and some of the things that really struck you as you wrote about it. And then we'll dive into some more specific questions.
Okay. Well, it's true that the coming decade, I think, is going to be sort of black and white with the past one, but it doesn't mean that the past one wasn't absolutely necessary. It was characterized, at least from the little I know, and again, as you said, we only kicked off in 2016, so it's really very much still a layperson speaking. You know, when I started, the first thing I did was to say I don't want it to be called microinsurance. And at the time, the management here at AXA said, yeah, you know, they tapped me on the shoulder and said, yeah, whatever, call it what you want, but you know, we want you to grow this. And I actually think today it was one of my best decisions ever to call it emerging customers, because a lot of people have a very specific definition of microinsurance in their head, but more specifically to me, microinsurance was what inclusive insurance was before. Microinsurance is inclusive insurance 1.0. We are already on inclusive insurance 2.0, and the next decade is inclusive insurance 3.0. And what I mean by that is that it's not 1.1 and 1.2 and 1.3. It's really strides. It was, at the time, everything obviously started a long time ago, and actually acts as a late mover in that respect, with things linked, insurance linked to loans. And that's what microinsurance was. It was going to see microfinance institutions and offering protection and the risk of default. And although that's essential, it's a very specific loan embedded proposition, and it's not a choice for clients. It was mandatory. And although it did bring some form of reassurance to the clients, it was more a lot of value brought to the lending institution. And so that's the first point, is that since then we've gone way beyond that. And that's one of the first things that I've tried, I hope to highlight, and it's come across as a message, is that new products have flourished, and it's a much more comprehensive approach, financial inclusion and inclusive insurance, than it was before. The other thing is that, of course, and we cannot labor this enough, but we can't ignore the role of digital, and that sounds like pushing open doors, as we say in French, but it's quite key. And although I'll come back to it, I think a lot of people love talking about, they talk about AI and blockchain and apps and satellites and power inclusion, etc. That's a bit, sometimes you feel like it's a bit of a bingo approach, but still, the digital approach has meant that we have, not approach, but the digital, let's say, revolution has meant that we have been able to push the frontiers of insurability. It doesn't mean that we haven't been faced with the same problems as before. And probably means that a lot of the problems from before are exacerbated. So, for example, if there's no longer any human touch point, and already traditionally insurance is a low touch point industry, even for the richest of clients. We're in touch with our clients when they have to pay, which is not a great moment for them, especially since it's a counter-cyclical product. So they pay for something that hasn't happened yet, as opposed to when you buy a yogurt and you get the product immediately. Here you're paying for something that you hope won't happen. For emerging customers, low to middle income, that's even more exacerbated as something that needs to be spun in their head on its axis. And then the second time when we're in contact with our clients, our traditional clients, is when there's a problem, which is again not a great moment. So it's a low touch point, and when there is an interaction, it's two not very valuable moments. So with the arrival of digital, we've managed to touch many more people, but that's exacerbated the point about how do you still introduce the human touch point? How do you make it a valuable moment? How do you make it that insurers go from being repairers or payers to partners, which is an even more important element for emerging customers, because either at best, they haven't ever heard of insurance or had it, at worst, they don't trust it. And I'm not sure yet that AI, although it is a form of human touch point, will be able to create trust. So although the second trend, which has pushed our ability to cover more people, which is the digital revolution, is great, we have to compensate for it by being more innovative, by introducing human contact in a different way than before, in particular for this population. And then, so that's what I try to push forward in calling, when I say it's from sort of insurance to a more holistic protection approach. Finally, I think it has to do with going from exclusive to inclusive. It's justified in a way that insurance excludes what often people call the sort of soi-disant subprime risks through exclusions, waiting periods, health checks, more information about where you live and what you do, etc. But it's quite ill-adapted, to say the least, to emerging customers. In terms of exclusions, in terms of ridiculous, ill-adapted exclusions, but in terms of exclusions all alone. It's a philosophy in itself that has to be challenged, and that's the second axis that needs to be spun, I think, and I say this sort of in all humility, and it really is a mindset shift. It's the way the products are constructed, but it's also the way the processes are constructed, and I actually think that's one of the great values that have been created by the tools that have been put in place by the microinsurance network, by the IO, etc., is that they also pay attention to process, which is much less sexy than products, and even internally within AXA, it's something that we've had to push our local entities towards because they're not used to it. But it's about how you distribute. It's about what are the real customer realities and how is it that you make it inclusive? How is it that this market becomes inclusive? How is it that policies are designed to be adapted, short, clear, quick enough to fit into an SMS, for example? So those to me are the three main sort of key drivers of going from where we are today, which is already inclusive insurance 2.0, to really starting to talk about billions, which I'm convinced we are going to be able to do together. I think this is very much a collaborative territory. Still, as I often say, it's not about sharing pieces of the pie because we've just probably put in the right ingredients and put it in the oven. So hopefully that will take us to the next step. But it's also about keeping those billions insured, because we go back to the same initial problem of any insurer. It's how do you get them to renew when we're still talking about low frequency, high impact risks?
That was a phenomenal overview, and I really appreciate all of those points. I have so many questions based on that, and I also want to make sure that we're getting people online the opportunity to ask questions. So please, if you have questions, let us know either by raising your hand or through chat. I want to follow up, Garance, on one of the last things you said there about this idea of products and process, and some of the tools that you mentioned just now and in your essay, like those provided by the ILO or the Microinsurance Center. One of the things that at CFI we believe we've been pushing this client centricity movement for a long time, with varying levels of success in terms of how that integrates into products and processes. But you mentioned some specific examples of situations where it worked well. Is that movement that you're seeing, do you think that's a function of the client centricity movement, or is there something about how insurance products need to be thought about to be successful that makes them sort of especially primed for that client-centric approach?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think it's a bit of both. There's first that the insurance industry traditionally, way beyond inclusive insurance, is a late mover in selling its products as opposed to them being bought. Because we had the luxury of time, because of the fact that insurance is a counter-cyclical product that's first bought before anything happens, and then maybe you never ever get the benefit from it. So that makes it very difficult for an insurer to actually fail. It takes a very long time, and it's a runoff, etc. So we were more in the boiling frog sort of metaphor, in very, very, very slowly heating water, whereas a lot of industries, from almost one year to the next, the auto industry, other industries were put in a pot of already very hot water, and so they jumped. So it took the insurance industry a much longer time to jump, but now they're obliged to, and now client centricity in the insurance industry has no longer become a politically correct thing to say, but has actually become a reality. And I think it's been 2 or 3 years, for example, here, that I no longer go to a meeting where a product is being discussed, and at the end we agree on a product between us, entre soi, and then we think about in a couple of months selling it, and then we say, okay, so we haven't asked the client. Oh, but that's okay. We're sure we understand what the client wants. So that it's first an overall sort of obligation in the sense that it's a survival mechanism, and in that sense, I think it's great that the insurance industry has latched on. But more specifically, it's got to do with what I was saying in the beginning, is that in the beginning, protecting this population that was much less aware and much more difficult to access because we couldn't use our traditional distribution processes that went through agents and brokers. Well, in the beginning, as I was saying, it was just a low embedded proposition, not much of a choice for clients. And so frameworks at the time, at least what I saw, and again, it's just from reading because I wasn't there, they encouraged to make these products better, not create new products, but kind of make the existing ones better. So was that the beginning of client centricity and human-centered design and insurance? Probably. So for example, it meant taking credit life and enhancing it. And today, for example, MicroInsure calls that enhanced credit life, and it means adding to a credit life product, spouse cover, accidental death benefits, funeral benefits, what have you. And then that's the sort of improvement momentum, baby steps, but iterative. And then there was more of a, let's not only try and improve the durability of candles, but let's look for electricity. And that was the wave of innovation, and that meant looking at all types of products across business lines. So there were all of a sudden several different versions of health products. And so the frameworks, the same ones that are really very solid, the ILO product framework called PACE, which I think means product access, cost and experience. Yeah, product access, cost and experience. They allow to steer innovation in the right direction. So it meant not taking an existing insurance product and putting it in the same oven. Sorry, again, my metaphors are so oven-oriented, but putting it in the same oven and shrinking it and saying, actually, micro is mini, but saying no. Now, actually, we have to rethink the customer journey. We have to rethink back to from exclusion to exclusion. So are these really the right exclusions, and shouldn't we add other things to it, etc.? And the other thing that these frameworks had is that they assess the results. So it isn't only about just, okay, the products are more adapted with the client more in the center, but it's also, okay, did we reach the results we wanted? And that also meant defining in the beginning what we were looking to achieve, which isn't, always the case with financial services. And finally, these frameworks, and again, especially PACE, but also the SWAP one, it goes beyond just analyzing the product characteristics, its client centricity, and what the results of the product are, but also it encompasses processes and distribution. How are products accessed? How are they understood? And once you have access, it doesn't mean you have usage. One of the key problems in microinsurance 1.0 and almost 1.5 is that there was a defined population, there was a need, there was actually starting to be a supply, but the difficulty was to transform need from need to demand, and to transform need into demand. It meant that there was an awareness that there was supply, and so these frameworks enabled to go beyond just assessing product, but processes again and distribution and access, awareness and usage. And actually, at Accion, we're trying to start creating our own sort of tool to guide our product quality framework. But trust me, we're not there yet. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks for that. I'm curious, based on those reflections of seeing all this sort of product development and innovation and being in all these conversations, do you have a favorite product or a favorite innovation, something that you think is working particularly well?
Well, there are two questions in what you're saying. I have a few favorite ones, but it doesn't mean they're working particularly well yet. But I think they have the potential to. So I do. I'll go from very, very simple back to the exclusion point to a bit more complex, but it doesn't mean it's complex just because it's complex behind the scenes. that it isn't very simple when you sell it. The first is linked to personal accident products, which are the simplest form. So it's death by accident, which is very rare when you think about it, thankfully, or invalidity by accident. A lot of the products sold to emerging customers, personal accident products, exclude accidents due to maternity, because it's considered that, you know, maternity is not a risk, it's a state of being, and you kind of had control over it, and we've known for a while that you've been pregnant, so it's excluded. And now we've managed to cover so many more people because we've simply included the possibility that if there's an accident because of maternity, that's also covered. So that's one of my favorite ones, and that one's working well. Another one that's working extremely well is to say it's a quite traditional term life cover, but we realized that in a lot of markets, and this is not only about bottom of the pyramid or low income populations, but also average middle class, a lot of women in particular, who have a different sort of a stance on the holistic protection of their households, are very worried that if something happens to them, and I have to say I have a few very funny quotes. I'm just going to introduce a bit of humor here for 2 seconds, where a lot of women said to us, and no man has ever said this to us, but in our focus groups and all the people that we interviewed, a lot of them said to us, we know that our men cannot stay alone, so they will necessarily remarry. And therefore, the second wife, I'm worried that she's not going to take care of my children in the same way that she will take care of hers. And actually, this is an innovation from Microinsure. They created a product called EduSave, which is term life, but where we pay to the school, to the university, the education of the children until they're 16 or 18 directly. And so it doesn't go through the family. I have a few others, but I'll let you answer it, and then I will listen. We need to listen to Beth also. So if not, I could ramble on for way too long.
Well, I mean, I hope that's a good thing. I hope that's a sign of all the great stuff that's happening in the space.
I hope so, or that I'm complete. But I think it's more the great stuff that's happening in the space.
So shifting the conversation a little bit, I mean, you mentioned in your remarks that we can't ignore the role of digital. I think there's a lot of conversations about sort of the role of digital and technology more broadly, and the role of fintechs in disrupting sort of traditional processes and traditional industries. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that, and if there's any specific, maybe not shouting out specific fintechs, but specific technologies that you're seeing having a significant disruptive effect, or if there's anything that you see in the insurance market that would really benefit from somebody taking a look at what technologies could be applied to help disrupt it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, as usual, it's about finding a balance. And, a lot of people think about, these sexy innovations. So, of course, apps and satellite imagery and connected chips. And, to my defense, I also talked about it in the essay, and they're important. And, blockchain powered inclusion and artificial intelligence, etc. And I really believe that it is going to continue. It started changing the inclusive insurance landscape, and it will continue, but maybe not necessarily at the pace at which everyone is expecting it, or at least we have to, bring along with that evolution other elements. So we can't deny, and it's essential, that smartphone penetration soared. And costs of a smartphone are like, now there's this Chinese smartphone in Nigeria, for example, that's absolutely great, but it's going for $30, right? But when you look at how people use the smartphones, there's a very different picture. The cost of internet access, poor connectivity, battery and storage uses, it comes down to people who actually have a smartphone. 90% of them, it appears, have also a feature phone in their back pocket. So we can't ignore, though, the progress that has been brought about by smartphones. And another great innovation, for example, an invention, is parametric insurance. I don't know if I probably wasn't very clear, and I didn't go very far in the essay about that, but it's insurance that has no human intervention, in the sense that we rely on imagery, on satellite imagery. And we say, okay, there's been more than 3 centimeters, so we have to agree with the policyholder on what the trigger is. Parametric is index-based insurance. We have to agree on an index, and we say, well, okay, if it rained more than 10 centimeters in the last 3 months, then we automatically pay. Should that person have had flooded fields or not? So it's taking out the cost of having agents who go and verify that something went wrong, and the amount of damage that was taken on by the farmer. And this is, I talk about agricultural parametric insurance, and in theory it's great, and to be honest, parametric insurance as an invention, as an innovation, is great across industries, the hotel industry, the cement industry, etc. But there's a basis risk issue, which means there's a difference between actual loss and indemnity paid. Just to take an example of innovation is great, but you have to take into account reality. So for example, in a drought, a farmer who lives right next to another farmer and who have the same trigger points of 10 centimeters in a month of rainfall might have had a bit more luck than his neighbor in terms of how much he's impacted. And that creates a lot of distrust, and honestly, it's one of the keys, and it sounds again like opening an open door, but it's a question of trust. So it's hard to argue with a smallholder farmer in Uganda who's never had a set of satellites, who doesn't trust really the good government with regards to reliable data. It's hard to argue with him that it's normal that his field is much more damaged than his neighbors, but they're getting the same thing. So I'm using this example just to show that the most effective uses so far, at least, of innovative digital technologies are the ones that start with the end customer. And it can be very low-tech, basic things. Enrollment via SMS or USSD remains at the core of what we do. But we can add things on top of that. You can add the ability to manage claims via WhatsApp, for example. WhatsApp is a very powerful tool in a world where people have only kind of 5 apps on their phone. WhatsApp can be used to train the agents who sell insurance, to train MFI loan officers, which is something that, for example, MicroInsure does, to train them to manage their queries. At one point, as I was saying in the beginning, technology is great, but we have to find an equilibrium and a balance with the human touch point. At one point, could we consider that artificial intelligence and chatbots are a form of replacement or quasi-replacement of the human touch point, in the sense that people have the sense that they're interacting with a stronger force of humans, so to speak, than just receiving a link on their phone. Social networks, in alignment with our payer to partner vision, we have to, through social networks, be able to identify what people need beyond protection. Do they need discounts to go to certain clinical networks or pharmacies? Do they need more public safety information? And that's using technology, using digital, using social networks, but to introduce more. Now, I know, just to finish, that a lot of people are talking about blockchain, but today, I mean, maybe one day, but I think if we have to start getting also other things right before launching into the sexiest of trends in technology, I think.
That response gave me so many more questions, but I don't have any more time to ask you questions, which is disappointing.
Okay. No, but I'm very excited to hear about Beth.
Yeah, so again, to everybody online, we want to thank Garance for her participation today. I think this inclusive insurance is super fascinating, and as conversations about financial health and resilience continue, we're just going to see growth in this area. And so we really thank you for your thoughts on what this can look like over the course of the next 10 years. For those online, if you didn't get a chance to ask your question, please reach out to us. And we'll try to get some information back to you. And I encourage people to read Garance's essay online if you haven't done so already. And Garance, thank you so much for joining us.
No, you're welcome. And I really want to also quickly pay tribute to Quentin Gissereau in my team, who was a great contributor also to the essay. So I just want to say that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now we move to our second speaker of the day, who I introduced briefly at the start, but we'll do so again for those who joined us maybe a little late. So Beth Ryan is the managing director at CFI. So she is our fearless leader here. She's served as a senior vice president at Accion since 2000, leading Accion's entry into Africa and India. She has written books. She has worked at USA. She has an illustrious career, and as a result of that, has great perspective on all the work that we do here and how this industry has really grown and changed, not only in the last 10 years, but going back farther than that. And so, Beth, I have you sitting across from me. So your essay was looking more about what we learned about customers and how to serve customers from our work here at CFI over the course of the past decade. I wonder if you could offer sort of your major thoughts based on what you wrote in your essay, and then also, since we've also had this great speaker, if you have any thoughts on what Garance was able to share with us too, I'd love to hear that before we hop into more questions.
Okay, thanks, Eric, and thank you so much, Garance. I think that I wish that we had been having some parametric insurance here in Washington, because it's been raining so much that we would definitely have been able to claim. I wanted to just talk about the perspective that I'm taking in this essay and why I took this perspective. We've been hearing the words client centricity a lot, and when I listen to people talk about what is client centricity, I often hear them say words that really sound like business terms: addressable market, customer acquisition, user interface, and I have this sense of, well, people are trying to be more customer centric, but they're not really taking the radical step to really absorb what a customer viewpoint would look like. And so I just you know, I'm not a demand side researcher, but I have been observing and becoming more and more interested in what customers are saying and trying to be as exposed to the voices of customers as possible. And so I decided to just step back and say, what would it, based on everything we know about customers, what would it look like if a customer was the inspiration, was the real inspiration behind what the financial services they receive looks like? And when I do that, it goes way beyond sort of going out and doing human-centered design. But I think it includes really being willing to experiment with very different products, upending many assumptions that we have about the way financial services should be delivered. And one of the things that I'm really happy about is the way that in this essay series, we see the industry grappling with those things and really getting deep into sort of a more intimate perspective with the customer. And I think, Garance, your remarks are exactly along those lines, where you see the sort of initial response in the insurance industry was, well, just do a sort of a dumbed down version of the products that are really easy for us, because of course people are poor and therefore we just need to find a product that doesn't cost much to deliver and doesn't cost much for them, and so that means it's going to be a really, really simple and not necessarily particularly useful product. And since then, there's been so much more thinking about really understanding what kind of risks do people care about, and how would we go about making a completely different kind of blueprint that would put an acceptable proposition together that would be appealing to and deal with those risks. And it's just impressive how far the insurance industry has come in changing its conventional wisdom. And that is really what I wanted to get at by this essay.
Great. One of the things that jumped out to me when reading your essays that you talk about, as you mentioned in your remarks, if we could imagine sort of a perfect world in which the financial inclusion system served clients perfectly, that ultimate goal would effectively be financial health, which is a concept we've talked a lot about at CFI. Financial health being this state of being where you can manage your day-to-day finances, be resilient to shocks, and plan for the long term. That seems like such an obvious thing to say that we're working towards, but that hasn't been what the conversation has been about necessarily, even in the development community for a long time. Why is that? What were the barriers to thinking about this as the ultimate outcome for clients?
So I think that financial health helps as a bridge between essentially the ultimate outcomes that people care about, or that people in the development world care about, and the financial services. So I think in the past we had made this big leap between financial services and poverty alleviation, and sort of the ultimate goals was better life and reduction in poverty especially. And that was never a very realistic proposition, because the sort of pathways through which that would take place were not very well articulated. And so I think financial health helps you, or helps us as a field, be more realistic about the kinds of outcomes that we're more likely to be able to influence. So financial services is more specifically directed at helping people manage their financial lives, achieve, and if they help you manage your day-to-day finances, if they provide a way to help you protect against risks and build up your assets toward longer-term goals, that is the way that it will help you reduce poverty. So another reason that I think that financial health is now coming to the fore is that, or at least maybe I can't say that's why the concept is coming, but it's certainly the reason that I'm attracted to the concept, is that as we talk to people, we find that people immediately resonate with this concept. And it doesn't matter whether you're a central banker or a farmer in a rural area of India. You kind of think of financial health in the same terms. It's a concept that everybody can relate to, and in fact, it's really important for people. So when you start to talk a little bit about the financial lives with customers, you find that it's a central theme of their life. They are constantly striving to be financially healthy, and they talk about it in the same way, kind of whether you're talking to people in Kenya, India, or Mexico, as we have done recently. So I think the concept is still young, and we're developing it and figuring out how to apply it. But I think it is the right concept to be working towards.
Great. And sort of related to that, one of the things that you talk about in your essay is this idea about better selves. We have financially healthy people, but we also want people to be able to sort of achieve their better selves. Can you talk more about what you meant by that, and what you see as what you've learned, and what you see as of the role of financial services in promoting better selves over the next decade?
So whenever you start to talk about financial health with people, they often sort of resort to this idea of they sort of split themselves into two. There's the good self that wants to do financial management right and wants to get ahead in life, and there's the bad self that just ignores that. And one of my very earliest lessons of that was listening to, it was in the U.S. example. There was a woman who called in. I was talking with Connie Evans, who ran a microfinance organization in Chicago, and one of her clients called her while I was talking with her, and she was at a shopping mall. And she said, Connie, you know that you've helped me to build up $1,500 in savings. And it's been really hard, and I've done a great job, and I need to reward myself. And I'm just gonna go buy a lot of clothes right now. And I'm calling you just because maybe you might have something to say about it. And so she's about to jump off the ledge, and Connie talked her down. Or at least I hope Connie talked her down. You know, I don't know whether she actually did that, but when we hear the same thing over and over again, we heard it recently in Eastern Europe when we tested a financial health quiz with people. They were like, well, we know what we're supposed to do, we just can't do it. And in Mexico, we recently heard people talking about all kinds of ways where they hide money from themselves. So one of the things that that I think is just a huge need in the pursuit of financial health is the ability to maintain some kind of discipline, and I think it's a somewhat underlooked in terms of product offer. I think we have not paid enough attention to that need, and it is difficult to get it right, because people know that it's not just a matter of self-discipline, it's also a matter of fate, that accidents happen, health crises happen, and so there's some balance between helping people put money and be disciplined, and yet still having access when they need it. So it's quite a difficult balance to get right, but I do think it's a focus area that we should be paying more attention to, because it's one of the things people want help with.
So related to that, I think part of what, when I think about trying to achieve my better self, I think about sort of the aspirational goals I have. And you talk about that a little bit in your essay also, the most cherished life goals that people have, and how we need products that can help serve them. You mentioned some things specifically that I think have started to get more traction in the industry, whether those are housing specific products or education specific products. I'm wondering if there's anything that you see on the horizon that is sort of especially heartening. So maybe, do you have a favorite product that's working on these issues?
Well, I can name a couple products that I like, and again, maybe like Garance, they're not necessarily at scale yet. One of them is Creditas, which is I guess it's a fintech startup, but it's kind of beyond the startup stage in Brazil, and it offers home equity loans and loans against automobiles. And this is in the market. It's essentially revolutionary, because there are many people who have houses but haven't ever had a way to use the assets that are represented by that are embodied in their assets, to be able to leverage that. I remember this was sort of the key point of Hernando de Soto's book on a few years ago. But Creditas has found a way to do loans against equity in houses and in automobiles. And this is not necessarily a portion of the poor, but it's certainly, they have managed to do this for a fairly low on the overall economic spectrum clientele. What was my other product that I wanted to mention? I forgot the other one, so I'll come back. It'll come back to me.
We'll circle back. So this is related to your essay. You talk a lot about behavioral economics and the role of helping us sort of reach those better selves. But one of the things that you've also written about is how far we have to go in terms of access, right? And getting people access to the products and getting people to use the products. A lot of that is sort of ecosystem level also, so you need sort of an enabling environment to help people do this. Could you talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you see on that front, or opportunities things that you think have gone particularly well in terms of helping people get access to these behaviorally oriented products?
So I remember my product, the one that I was
Okay,
going
let's go back to products
going back.
first. Yeah.
Yes. So the other one that I wanted to mention was gift to pension. And gift to pension is I'm not sure that it's a long-term viable product, but it certainly illustrates a few things that are needed. So gift to pension is a product that was developed by a couple of innovators in India who observed that people who hire domestic help, essentially those people who have spent lifetimes providing domestic service to households, once they're too old to work, they really have nothing, and they go back to their home area and essentially live out the rest of their lives in poverty quite often. And so gift to pension is just a way for employers to easily set up pension contributions for their domestic employees. And it works because in terms of like looking at the ecosystem, one of the reasons it works is because in India there is a national pension system that anybody can join. The problem is getting the contributions in. And so gift to pension sets that all up and makes it easy. It relies on the fact that that the employers tend to have computers and be able to be enough literate to be able to get through the setup, and that they are willing to set aside a portion of the salary or make an extra contribution over time. So I think one of the things that what I've been seeing that both Creditas and Gift to Pension talk about or address is the longer term issues. And so to me, one of the things that's been going on in the financial inclusion world has been short-term innovation, and payments having been the biggest focus in the last few years. And I think we need to be spending a little bit more time innovating around longer-term financial products, which are more difficult. But certainly, if we want to look at financial health as something that contributes to long-term reaching of long-term goals, then we need to look at products that have longer terms. Now, back to the question
about ecosystems, yeah, and how they support some of the things that you're talking about. So to frame up that question a little bit in a different way, I mean, you mentioned when you were just talking about the gift to pension that they were able to function because certain things existed in the ecosystem already. Whether in this case it was a particular product, but sometimes that's the regulatory environment, sometimes it's just having the technical connectivity. Are big pieces missing, or big specific things that you think we need to focus on that can really enable customers to achieve their financial health, like through an ecosystem sort of approach?
Well, I mean, the one that I continually like to talk about is consumer protection. As we make more offers to clients for new and innovative products that are more specifically designed to meet their needs, then it does throw up more risks, and we see risks emerging a lot now with digital, and so certainly as the ecosystems strengthen their attention to consumer protection issues, that is going to make a big difference.
Could you talk a little bit more about the digital risks that you see? I mean, one of the initiatives we have at CFI is the SMART campaign, which is focused on consumer protection. And we've been doing more work recently on thinking through that digital piece. How do we have to think about client protection differently as we continue to engage with these digital products, and what are some of the risks that you're seeing?
So I think for the most part, the risks are the issues are the same issues, or we still have transparency as a core issue. We still have protection against over-indebtedness as a core issue. We still have fairness as a core issue, and appropriate and truthful marketing. But the issues manifest themselves in different ways. And then there are a few new issues. Certainly the data privacy issue and data security is the major new risk that wasn't particularly salient in the traditional world. But just an example on transparency, you're losing the human interface, and it's especially difficult for people who have low income and low literacy. So the challenges are harder, especially if you're trying to communicate through a feature phone or a USSD or SMS channel, to make sure that a person understands. I think MicroSafe has been doing some great work on what they call orality, which is kind of a weird term, but on how to have digital interfaces that are understandable to people, and so that's an example of a kind of a consumer risk that shows up in a different way because of digital than it did originally, but it's still the same basic principle.
Great. So we only have a couple minutes left, and so just sort of a last question. So this is our 10-year anniversary. We're hoping to have another one of these 10 years from now. If you could sort of strike that sort of put that stick in the mud, if you will, for people to work towards, what is that big message? What do you want to see 10 years from now that we don't have now?
Well, my big question, but
and you only have 1 minute to answer it, so no pressure.
Yeah, I mean, we laid out at CFI, we've laid out our vision of what it means to have full financial inclusion, which includes that people have a full range of products, that the products have quality, are delivered with quality, that everybody has access who needs those products or can use them, that the marketplace is competitive and continually evolving, and that the customers are gaining financial capability as they use the products. It will be wonderful to see that come true in 10 years. And there's pieces of that are coming true. Certainly, we're making access much more widespread, but when I look at whether people really are getting a full suite of quality products, you see that there's quite a long way to go. And but I think that the decade of product innovation is what's coming up now.
Great, thanks so much, and thanks for everyone who is on the call. That is our time for today. As I mentioned, we'll be hosting more of these webinars in the future as we work through our series on getting financial inclusion right. There's a link on your slide to direct you where those series will be posted. And we're really excited about some of the essays that we have upcoming. And again, I want to thank Garance and Beth for sharing their thoughts with us on their essay. And again, to Citi Foundation and the AXA Group and the other supporters of CFI at 10. Thanks everyone, and we hope you have a wonderful weekend.